Hello, and welcome to my channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This is a little blue book. This happens to be number 813 of the Contemporary American Philosophers. It is about Santayana, James, and Dewey, and it was written by Will Durant, PhD. This is part 6, and likely the final part of this book. And we left off on page 61. Do not coincide with political boundaries. Associations of mathematicians, chemists, astronomers, business, corporations, labor organizations, churches are transnational because the interests they represent are worldwide. In such ways as these, internationalism is not an aspiration but a fact, not a sentimental idea but a force. Yet these interests are cut across and thrown out of gear by the traditional doctrine of exclusive national sovereignty. It is the vogue of this doctrine or dogma that presents the strongest barrier to the effective formation of an international mind, which alone agrees with the moving forces of present-day labor, commerce, science, art, and religion. But political reconstruction will come only when we apply to our social problems the experimental methods and attitudes which have succeeded so well in the natural sciences. We are still in the metaphysical stage of political philosophy. We fling abstractions at one another's heads, and when the battle is over, nothing is won. We cannot cure our social ills with wholesale ideas, magnificent generalizations like individualism or order, democracy or monarchy or aristocracy or whatnot. We must meet each problem with a specific hypothesis and no universal theory. Theories are tentacles, and fruitful progressive living must rely on trial and error. The experimental attitude substitutes detailed analysis for wholesale assertions, specific inquiries for temperamental convictions, small facts for opinions, whose size is in the precise ratio to their vagueness. It is within the social sciences, in morals, politics, and education, that thinking still goes on by large antithesis by theoretical oppositions of order and freedom, individualism and socialism, culture and utility, spontaneity and discipline, actuality and tradition. The field of the physical sciences was once occupied by similar total views, whose emotional appeal was inversely as their intellectual clarity. But with the advance of the experimental method, the question has ceased to be which one of two rival claimants has a right to the field. It has become a question of clearing up a confused subject matter by attacking it bit by bit. I do not know a case where the final result was anything like victory for one or another among the pre-experimental notions. All of them disappeared because they became increasingly irrelevant to the situation discovered, and with their detected irrelevance they became unmeaning and uninteresting. It is in this field, in this application of human knowledge to our social antagonisms, that the work of philosophy should lie. Philosophy clings like a timid spinster to the old-fashioned problems and ideas. Direct preoccupation with contemporary difficulties is left to literature and politics. Philosophy is in flight today before the sciences, one after another of which have run away from her into the productive world, until she is left chill and alone, like a forsaken mother, with the vitals gone from her and almost all her cupboards empty. Philosophy has withdrawn herself timidly from her real concerns. men and their life in the world, into a crumbling corner called epistemology, and is in danger every moment of being ousted by the laws that prohibit habitation in flimsy and rickety structures. But these old problems have lost their meaning for us. We do not solve them, we get over them. They evaporate in the heat of social friction and living change. Philosophy, like everything else, must secularize itself. It must stay on the earth and earn its keep by illuminating life. What serious-minded men, not engaged in the professional business of philosophy, most want to know is what modifications and abandonments of intellectual inheritance are required by the newer industrial, political, and scientific movements. The task of future philosophy is to clarify men's ideas as to the social and moral strifes of their own day. Its aim is to become, so far as it's humanly possible, an organ for dealing with these conflicts. A Catholic and far-sighted theory of the adjustment of the conflicting factors of life is philosophy. A philosophy so understood might at last produce philosophers worthy to be kings. Conclusion. If the reader will not summarize for himself these three philosophies, he will perhaps see more justice than at first in that degraded of chronology which placed Santayana before James and Dewey. It is clearer in retrospect that the most eloquent and subtle of our living thinkers belongs almost wholly to the cultural traditions of Europe. That William James, though attached in many ways to that tradition, caught the spirit of at least the Eastern America in his thinking, and the spirit of all America in his style, and that John Dewey, product of East and West alike, has given philosophic form to the realistic and democratic temper of his people. It becomes evident that our ancient dependence on European thought is lessening, that we are beginning to do our own work in philosophy, literature, and science, and in our own way. Merely beginning, of course, for we are still young, and we have not yet learned to walk entirely without the assistance of our European ancestry. But if we find it hard to surpass ourselves, and are sometimes discouraged with our own superficiality, our provincialism, our narrowness, and our bigotry, our immature intolerance, and our timid violence against innovation and experiment, let us remember that England needed 800 years between her foundation and her Shakespeare, and that France needed 800 years between her foundation and her Montenegro. We have drawn to us from Europe and selected for survival and imitation among ourselves rather the initiative individualist and the acquisitive pioneer than the meditative and artistic souls. We have had to spend our energies in clearing our great forests and tapping the wealth of our soil. We have had no time yet to bring forth a native literature and a mature philosophy. But we have become wealthy. Wealth is the prelude to art. In every country where centuries of physical effort have accumulated the measures for luxury and leisure, culture has followed as naturally as vegetation grows in a rich and watered soil. To have become wealthy was the first necessity a nation too must live before it can philosophize. No doubt we have grown faster than nations usually have grown, and the disorder of our souls is due to the rapidity of our development. We are like youths, disturbed and unbalanced, for a time, by the sudden growth and experience of puberty. But soon our maturity will come. Our minds will catch up with our bodies, our culture, with our possessions. Perhaps there are greater souls than Shakespeare's and greater minds than Plato's waiting to be born. When we have learned to reverence liberty as well as wealth, we too shall have our Renaissance. This was written in, let's see, copyright I believe was 1925. Come on, copyright page. Come on. Sometimes these pages are just horrendous to get apart. Copyright 1925, Tatum and Jones. There you can see. So I don't think we have really reached that point that the conclusion spoke of yet. Okay, that ends book number 813, Contemporary American Philosophers, Santayana, James, and Dewey, written by Will Durant, PhD. And we will stop there.